Chosen one. There are places inside your story that no one knows, nights that whispered pain into your bones while the world kept turning. Moments so hidden, even you questioned if they were real. Because no one saw them, no one clapped, no one comforted, no one came, but God did. Not with fanfare, not with flashes of lightning, but with silence, with shadows, with stillness so heavy it made you wonder if heaven had turned its face. But it hadn't. He was watching. He was shaping. He was training you where no eye could see and no voice could reach. You weren't forgotten. You were being formed. There is a kind of training that does not happen in the open. There is a kind of glory that cannot be born under the spotlight. And there is a kind of light that can only emerge from deep, sacred darkness. So if you've been there, if you've cried on your knees without knowing what you were praying for, if you've begged for signs but only received silence, if your spirit ached and your heart broke and nothing made sense for far too long, you weren't being punished, you were being prepared. Because those who carry the greatest light often walk through the longest nights, and you, yes you, were called to carry something eternal. You may not know it yet. You may still feel cracked, tired, unsure, but that doesn't disqualify you. It proves you're ready, because what was broken in you wasn't your value. It was the illusion that strength looks like perfection, the lie that worth comes from being seen, the myth that purpose must always feel purposeful. God dismantled those things in your quiet hours. He let the noise fall away so you could hear the whisper of who you really are. Not the version the world wanted, not the identity people expected, but the one you were always meant to become. And that kind of becoming, it's not loud, it's not pretty, it's not fast, it's sacred, it's slow, it's painful, but it is also permanent. There are seeds that can only grow underground. They must crack in the soil, break open, be covered in dirt, be unseen for a season. Not because they are dead, but because they are destined. That was you, covered, not cursed, hidden, not abandoned, planted, not buried. You didn't lose yourself. You were being returned to yourself, stripped of distractions, freed from false definitions, pulled from the noise and into the knowing. So when people walked away, when doors refused to open, when timing never seemed to align, that wasn't rejection, that was refinement. And even now, as you listen to these words, as something stirs in your chest you can't explain, know this: the world didn't need to see your training, because heaven did, and heaven never forgets what it forges. Every moment you endured in silence, every night you chose faith over fear, every breath you took while your spirit felt suffocated. They counted, they built you, they carved depth into your soul that cannot be faked. They taught your spirit how to recognize real light, because there is a counterfeit light that blinds, but there is a holy light that heals. And that's the kind of light rising in you now. But don't rush it, don't force it. Let it rise the same way it was built, in rhythm with your soul, in alignment with the divine, because what you're stepping into next, it's not a performance, it's not a platform, it's not a comeback, it's a revelation, a revealing of the one God trained in the dark. And when you rise, you will not rise to prove, but to embody. Not to impress, but to illuminate. Not to chase validation, but to carry presence. Because you are not here to convince the world you're worthy. You are here to remember that you already are. And your remembering will awaken others. Your truth will stir something in those who are still hiding. Have you ever felt like your silence wasn't empty, but full of things no one else could carry with you? That wasn't weakness, that was trust. Heaven doesn't require volume, it responds to consistency. If you've ever held it together when no one was watching, write in the comments, God saw what no one else did. And type 77 to mark this moment as seen and sacred, then subscribe. Not for inspiration, but for reminders that your quiet obedience wasn't ignored, it was recorded. And now it's time for your next chapter to begin. Your Light will not compete, it will guide. But before any of that can happen, you must first believe that none of your pain was wasted, none of your waiting was empty, none of your stillness was without purpose. The delays, the heartbreaks, the detours, they were not the end. They were the alignment, the holy redirection, the loving interruption that said, not this way, not yet, not until you are rooted, because fruit that grows too fast falls too soon. But roots hold everything together, and God was growing your roots, deep, unshakable, invisible to others, but intimately known by Him. So if you've ever felt like no one understands you, if you've ever wondered why your story feels so different, so alone, so delayed, it's because your assignment is different. Your light will not flicker like others. It was never meant to. It is not a match, it is a flame, and flames are not rushed, they are kindled. So stay with it, keep tending the fire, even if no one claps, even if no one sees, even if no one comes to tell you you're doing well. Because one day, soon, the light in you will rise, not because you chased it, but because you became it. And when that happens, those who overlooked you will wonder how you stayed so faithful in silence, and the answer will not be found in your words. It will be found in your walk, your quiet endurance, your sacred resilience, your unwavering hope in a season that tried to strip you of all of it. That's what makes you chosen, not that you shouted the loudest, but that you stayed when it was hardest. And now something is changing. You feel it, don't you? Not as noise, but as knowing, not as pressure, but as presence. You are not becoming, you are arriving. So take a breath. Let this moment settle in your bones, because part 2 is coming. And when it does, you'll understand why the dark had to last so long, and why it was never the end, only the beginning. Chosen one. There is something sacred about not being seen. Not because being unseen is easy, but because in that space, where the crowd is absent and the applause is silent, the soul begins to listen. You know what it feels like to be delayed, to pray and not receive, to knock and hear no answer, to wait and wait and wait, until the waiting itself begins to ache. But here is what no one told you. Delay is not denial. It's divine timing, and you, beloved, were never being ignored. You were being aligned. There were prayers you whispered through tears that seemed to go unanswered, not because heaven didn't hear you, but because heaven was protecting you from what you couldn't yet carry, from what would have broken you too soon, from what your spirit wasn't ready to hold. Because the truth is, some blessings can crush if they come too early, and some doors, if opened before their time, lead to ruin instead of rising. You asked for purpose, but God gave you preparation. You asked for visibility, but He gave you vision. He saw what you couldn't. He knew what you didn't, and instead of rushing you forward, He pulled you deeper, deeper into truth, deeper into trust, deeper into the kind of strength that only grows in silence. And maybe you looked around and saw others move ahead. You watched them rise while you remained still. You celebrated their milestones, while you questioned your own steps. But what you didn't see was that while they were building platforms, you were building foundation, because He knew what was coming, and you were never being punished. You were being preserved. That's why the connections fell apart. That's why certain people drifted. That's why opportunities evaporated before they could be grasped. It wasn't bad luck, it was divine protection, because not everyone is meant to walk with you where you're going. Not every door deserves your energy. Not every stage is built to carry your spirit. So when the silence stretched longer than you expected, it wasn't emptiness, it was calibration. God was tuning your frequency so that you would no longer chase what's not for you, but attract what is aligned with you. And now, you're beginning to feel the shift. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's unmistakable. A stillness in your soul, a clarity in your mind, a peace that no longer depends on understanding. You're no longer begging for permission to exist. You're no longer shrinking to be acceptable. You're no longer looking for signs because you became one. And that changes everything. Because now, when you walk into a space, you don't enter wondering if you belong. You walk in knowing you were sent. You're not seeking the spotlight, you're bringing the fire. But listen carefully. This fire did not come without cost. It was born in your waiting. It was carved through the ache of delay. It was shaped in those lonely places where you thought God was absent, but he wasn't. He was crafting you with intention. Every moment you felt overlooked, he was looking deeper. Every tear you thought fell without purpose, he was collecting. He was watching your character form, your roots dig down, your soul stabilize. Because when your time came, you wouldn't just rise, you would last. This isn't about a temporary moment of attention. This is about sustained radiance. Light that doesn't flicker with the wind. Faith that doesn't waver with the noise. And that kind of light, it's not built in comfort. It's built in surrender. You surrendered, even when it didn't make sense, even when it hurt, even when you had every reason to quit. You stayed, you showed up, you believed anyway. And that kind of consistency, heaven does not overlook that. So if you're wondering why the pressure felt so personal, why your season seemed longer than others, why the road curved when you expected it to rise, it's because the light you're about to carry is not ordinary. It's healing light, transformative light, light that will ignite others, not just inspire them. And to carry that kind of light, you had to be crushed first. Not destroyed but pressed, not broken but remade. So the next time you're tempted to look back and question, why did it take so long? Let your spirit answer, because glory takes time. Because oil only flows after the pressing. Because light is only pure when the vessel has been emptied of ego. And now, you're emptied. Of the need to impress, of the desire to prove, of the fear that held you hostage. What remains is real, is ready, is radiant. This is the part where you stop waiting. This is the part where you stop wondering. This is the part where you realize it's not that God delayed your blessing, it's that he delayed the world from seeing you until you were strong enough to hold it. You were the blessing being prepared, the gift being refined, the voice being tuned, and now you're ready to be heard. So speak, move, shine. Not because the delay is over, but because its purpose is complete. You are not late. You are right on divine time. And when you realize that, you stop racing and start rising. Because chosen one, you were never just waiting. You were becoming, and now, part 3 awaits. Chosen one, there are moments you lived that words can't explain. Nights when your breath trembled under the weight of everything unspoken. Seasons where the silence stretched so far, it made you question if heaven still remembered your name. You did not just survive those days, you grew in them, but no one saw it, did they? They didn't see how you woke up and carried a heart that had been cracked one too many times. They didn't hear the internal conversations you had when giving up seemed easier than standing again. They didn't witness the tears you wiped away in private so the world would never suspect you were breaking. But God did. He saw every unseen sacrifice. He felt every unvoiced ache, and in those moments when it looked like nothing was happening, everything was. Because while the world measures progress by what's visible, heaven measures it by what's becoming unshakable. And you, chosen one, have become unshakable. Not because you forced strength, but because you allowed the breaking to teach you how to bend without losing your soul. There's a wisdom that only pain can reveal. Not the kind that makes you bitter, but the kind that clears your vision. It's the knowing that comes from walking through the fire and realizing your spirit didn't burn, it refined. And now you carry that kind of knowing. It's in your silence, it's in your stillness, it's in the way your presence speaks louder than your past ever could. Because the light you carry now, it's not a performance, it's not noise, it's not applause. It's truth, and truth doesn't beg to be seen, it simply radiates. But don't forget this, before you carried that light, you first carried the weight. You carried disappointment, you carried heartbreak, you carried the burden of not understanding why your path looked so different. And now you know it had to, because a soul like yours wasn't made for shallow waters. You were called to depth, to stillness, to spaces where noise cannot go. That's why things didn't work out the way you planned. That's why doors stayed closed longer than you expected. That's why people left. That's why timelines shattered. Because God wasn't interested in building you fast. He was interested in building you real. You don't need everything to make sense anymore. You've stopped demanding that every piece fits neatly. Because now you understand. Purpose often arrives disguised as pain, and when you carry that understanding, you stop resenting the process. You start revering it. You see now that the silence was sacred, that the confusion was a crucible, that the stillness wasn't absence. It was alignment. And alignment doesn't shout, it doesn't compete, it simply flows. You don't rush anymore, you don't chase what isn't meant for you, you don't beg the doors to open, because you've realized that what's truly aligned doesn't need to be forced. And because of that, you've changed. People may not be able to name it, but they can feel it. There's something different in your presence, not louder but deeper, not grander but grounded, not attention-seeking but magnetic. That's what happens when light is forged in the dark. It no longer flickers with outside winds. It no longer fades with opinions. It no longer bends to applause, because now your light is anchored, not in who you used to be, but in who you became when no one was looking. And that version of you, that quiet, wise, steady version, was never built on easy seasons. It was carved through nights of wrestling with doubt, through prayers you never told anyone about, through moments when you loved, forgave, and gave your best, and received nothing in return. But even then, you kept showing up. That's why your glow feels different now. It's not cosmetic, it's cosmic. It doesn't seek permission, it doesn't need translation. It simply exists, and it heals everything it touches. But not everyone will understand it. Some will be drawn to it, some will be disturbed by it, because real light does not just illuminate, it reveals. And revelation makes people choose. Some will celebrate you, some will withdraw, some will try to return, not because they see you, but because they feel the warmth. Let them come. Let them go. Your job is not to manage their reactions. Your job is to stay aligned. Because this season isn't about crowd-pleasing, it's about soul-leading. You didn't walk through all that darkness to shine like everyone else. You walked through it to become the kind of light that leads others out, and that requires clarity. Discernment, boundaries that protect, not punish. Because the light you carry now is precious, and not everyone can be entrusted with it. So walk wisely. Speak slowly. Choose intentionally. Not from fear, but from reverence. Because every step you take now echoes deeper than before. Every word you speak carries weight. Every silence you keep holds power. That's what your journey taught you. That's what the waiting shaped in you. And that's why your rise will not look like anyone else's, because it wasn't built on speed. It was built on surrender. It wasn't motivated by being seen. It was born from being still. So no, you're not shining. Despite what happened, you're shining because of it. The storm didn't ruin you. It revealed you. And now, the world may try to label what they see, but only you know what it took to stand in this light. And heaven remembers. Heaven rejoices, because chosen one, you didn't just pass the test, you became the testimony. And your story, your silent, sacred, slow-burning story, is about to awaken others, because now your light is not just visible, it's undeniable. And the ones meant to walk with you in the next part of your becoming, they are already being drawn, because light recognizes light. And you finally know who you are. So breathe, stand tall, Rest in this knowing. You are not behind. You are blooming, and part 4 is already rising. Chosen one, there is a quiet knowing inside of you now, a stillness that didn't come from peace, but from pain that was finally surrendered. It's the kind of stillness that knows what it costs to arrive here. Because this version of you didn't come easy. You had to let go of so much just to hold on to yourself. You released timelines that were never yours. You loosened your grip on people who could not go where you were being led. You learned that love, when misaligned, becomes weight. And not everything heavy is holy. It hurt, didn't it? To watch people you once prayed for drift out of reach, to feel the sting of being misunderstood by those you once called home, to realize that peace often requires parting, but you did it. You chose alignment over approval. You chose stillness over noise. You chose the truth, even when it unraveled everything you built from illusion. And now you're lighter, not because nothing matters, but because you finally understand what does. And with that clarity comes a responsibility to guard your light, because the glow you now carry is not decorative. It's sacred. It was earned in dark seasons when no one noticed, when no one clapped, when no one stayed. So you don't give it away cheaply. You don't hand your peace to anyone who hasn't learned how to hold it. You don't shrink your shine for those who are still hiding from their own, not out of pride, but out of preservation. Because what was refined in private must be protected in public. That's why some doors still won't open. That's why some people still won't return. That's why some paths remain blocked. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because God is doing something right. He's not keeping you from connection. He's keeping you from contamination. There are places your presence no longer fits. There are conversations your soul no longer feeds on. There are environments that once felt like home, but now echo with unfamiliarity. That's not rejection, that's evolution. And evolution, while sacred, is rarely comfortable because transformation demands space, not just around you, but within you. It clears out what no longer resonates. It burns away what no longer serves. It makes room for what's real. And sometimes what's real looks like solitude. You've been walking that path, haven't you? The one where the noise fades, the circle shrinks, and your only guide is the whisper in your spirit that says, keep going. And somehow you did. You kept going when nothing made sense, when clarity felt like a rumor, when every step felt like walking on fog. But the fog is lifting now, not because the world changed, but because you did. You no longer crave what once distracted you. You no longer chase what once drained you. You no longer reach for what you already released. And that's freedom. Not the kind that's loud or flashy, but the kind that lets you breathe again. The kind that doesn't need applause to feel worthy. The kind that finds joy in the quiet. The kind that knows whatever is meant for you will not need to be forced. You've outgrown striving, you've matured past proving, you've stepped into something deeper, something eternal, and with every breath, you are remembering who you are, not the version they named, not the one shaped by wounds, but the one that was hidden in the dark, guarded by silence, and awakened by surrender. That version of you doesn't explain anymore, it just is. That version walks into a room and changes the temperature, not through noise, but through presence. That version doesn't seek to be liked, it seeks to be true. Because when you've been stripped down to essence, you no longer decorate yourself with validation. You move with clarity, you speak with discernment, you live with purpose and purpose. It doesn't need to scream, it simply aligns. So now you understand, not everyone can come with you. Not because they're wrong, not because you're better, but because you're different now. You were trained differently, tested differently, trusted differently, and with that trust comes boundaries, not walls, but thresholds. Because not everything holy is meant to be shared carelessly. Some things are sacred, some things are for the inner room, some things were whispered to you in the dark, and not everyone is meant to hear them. So protect the oil, honor the journey, guard the glow, not from fear, but from reverence. Because what's rising in you now, it's not just for show, it's for service. And to serve from a pure place, you must remain anchored in truth. So check your foundation, return to your roots, stay rooted in what sustained you when everything else fell away. Remember how far you've come, not just in distance, but in depth. You no longer panic when things fall apart. You've learned to pause instead. You've learned that endings are often invitations. You've learned that closed doors are often divine protection in disguise. And that wisdom is your weapon. It disarms confusion. It silences fear. It grounds you in storms that once shook your entire world. That's what God was building in you, not just brilliance, but stability, not just light, but weight, because light without roots is fleeting. But you are anchored. You are not easily moved. You are not easily shaken. You are not easily swayed, because you've already been through the breaking. And what remains is not fragile, it's forged. So now you walk differently. You carry yourself like someone who knows they were chosen. You speak like someone who has met truth in the wilderness. You rest like someone who trusts divine timing. You know what it means to be led, to be hidden, to be held. And now you're being revealed, not as a performance, but as a presence, not to impress, but to awaken, not to rise above others, but to rise into the version of yourself that was always there, waiting for permission you no longer need. So don't look back. What fell away was never yours to carry. What faded was never meant to follow. What ended was always part of the beginning. You didn't lose anything that was meant to stay. You simply made space for what's about to arrive. And part 5 is closer than you think. Chosen one. There was a time when you begged for signs. You searched the sky for patterns. You listened to every voice that sounded spiritual. You asked again and again, is this it? Is this where it all changes? But the sign wasn't in the sky. It wasn't in numbers. It wasn't in symbols or confirmation from others. It was you. You were always the sign, because only those who have wrestled with silence and still kept walking carry the kind of power that no external sign could ever give. You've lived through nights that felt endless. You've walked through days where hope was faint. You've stood in places where your prayers echoed and no answer came, and yet you kept going, not because you were sure, but because something deeper than certainty was alive in you. Faith, not loud, not always confident, but steady, quiet, enduring. That faith, that invisible flame you protected when the wind tried to extinguish it, that's what made you radiant now. Not your perfection, not your certainty, but your persistence. You stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You loved when it hurt to open your heart. You forgave when your spirit wanted to close off, and because of that, you became what you once waited for. You no longer need the world to tell you who you are. You no longer ask for permission to rise. You no longer beg for acceptance from spaces that were never built to hold your soul. You have become your own confirmation, your own compass, your own clarity, and not because you know everything, but because you now know what matters. You've tasted loneliness and didn't let it harden you. You've known loss and didn't let it define you. You've danced with doubt and didn't let it lead, and that's what makes you different now. Not louder, not flashier, but deeper. Your voice carries gravity, not because it demands attention, but because it's anchored in truth. Your walk feels different, not because it's perfect, but because it's aligned. You are no longer who you were before the darkness. That version of you, the one who sought approval, who feared silence, who chased validation. That version served its purpose, but it could not survive the storm. Only truth did, and what remains in you now is what cannot be taken. You've become grounded, rooted, unshakable. Not because you never fall, but because you rise differently now. You don't scramble to fix what falls apart. You pause. You listen. You discern because now you understand. Some things fall so you can rise. Some endings come to bless you with beginnings you never imagined. Some closings are gifts dressed in confusion. And so you've stopped asking, "Why me?" You've started whispering, "Thank you." Not because it all makes sense, but because it no longer needs to. You're no longer desperate for the path to look clear. You just want it to be real. And now, everything real is finding you. Not because you chased it, but because you aligned with it. Because when your frequency shifts, so does your reality. And right now, your spirit is vibrating at a new rhythm, not of effort, but of essence. You don't have to strive. You simply show up. You don't have to convince. You simply exist. And those who are meant for you, they feel it. Your light doesn't scream, "See me." It whispers, "Feel me." Because it's not just light, it's presence, it's proof. Proof that you walked through fire and still carry warmth. Proof that you lived through endings and still carry love. Proof that you endured silence and still carry voice. You don't just carry light. You are the light, the one others didn't expect. The one even you doubted, but the one that rose anyway. And now, everything around you will begin to shift. Not because you changed them, but because your very existence requires a new atmosphere. The old spaces will no longer hold you. The old roles will no longer fit you. The old labels will no longer describe you, because you're not returning to who you were. You're emerging into who you always were beneath the layers. The world may not recognize you at first. That's okay. They were never supposed to recognize what heaven had hidden, but now the veil has lifted, the light has risen, the time has come. And this time, you don't wait to be invited. You walk in knowing you belong, not with arrogance, but with reverence, not with force, but with alignment. Because you were trained in the unseen, you were refined in the hidden, you were shaped by hands that don't seek applause. And when God shapes you, no man can define you. So walk in that, not because it's easy, but because it's true. Let your life be the message. Let your presence be the sign. Let your silence be the sermon. You don't have to prove anything. You already are everything. So breathe, pause, stand still for a moment. Feel what you carry, the depth, the stillness, the knowing. You are the evidence of divine timing. You are the fruit of sacred delay. You are the living result of what it means to rise without rushing. And now, you're not just entering a new season. You are the season of clarity, the season of alignment. The season of effortless light, so let it shine, let it stretch, let it spill into every corner of your life. This is not the kind of light that flickers. This is not the kind of light that fades. This is the kind of light that cannot be dimmed because it doesn't come from others. It comes from within, and part 6 is already calling your name. Chosen one, there is a fire inside of you now that wasn't there before. Not a wildfire that burns without aim, but a holy flame, steady, refined, unshakable. This flame wasn't lit by the approval of others. It wasn't sparked by applause. It wasn't created in comfort. It was built in the dark. It was born the day you chose to trust instead of run. It grew when you stayed faithful in silence. It deepened when no one noticed and you showed up anyway. And now it burns, not because of effort, but because of alignment. You don't chase your calling anymore. You walk in it. You don't perform for acceptance. You breathe purpose, because now you carry something eternal, something sacred, something heaven placed in you when the world was silent. And here's the truth. The darkness was never your enemy. It was your initiation. The silence wasn't abandonment. It was instruction. The pressure wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And that weight you carried, it wasn't meant to crush you, it was meant to shape you. You've been sculpted now, not into someone better than others, but into someone truer to who you really are. The masks fell off, the illusions burned away, the parts of you that needed to die have been laid to rest, and now what remains is real, is whole, is holy. This version of you doesn't need to be announced. It is felt. When you walk into a space now, you carry something more than words. You carry presence. Presence that doesn't need to explain itself. Presence that doesn't seek permission. Presence that is born from knowing. You've already been seen by the only one who matters. So you don't lower your light to comfort others. You don't hide your strength to make room for their fear. You don't shrink to fit back into what you've outgrown, because you didn't go through all that darkness just to play small. You were trained in fire so you could lead with peace. And not everyone will understand it. Not everyone will celebrate it. That's okay. You're not here for attention, you're here for impact. And impact doesn't always come with claps. Sometimes it comes with silence. Sometimes it comes with standing alone. But now, you're no longer afraid of standing alone, because you're never truly alone. Heaven has walked with you through the wilderness. Heaven watched you when no one else did. Heaven remembered what you forgot, that even in your weakest moment, you were being refined for this. For now, because this is not just a new chapter, this is a new identity, not someone trying to find the light, but someone who is the light. You are no longer the version who was waiting to be chosen. You are the one who was chosen all along. And now, you finally see it. Not with ego, but with reverence. Not with pride, but with gratitude, because you know nothing about your glow came easy. It came from nights you thought you wouldn't make it. It came from losses that left you breathless. It came from prayers you didn't know how to finish. And yet, here you are, still burning, still standing, still believing, and what's ahead of you now? It won't just be a reward. It will be reflection, a mirror of all you've carried, a response to all you've sown. A revealing of the seed that grew in hidden places. You were never forgotten. You were never left behind. You were planted, and when a seed is planted, no one sees what happens in the soil. No one applauds when roots go down. No one celebrates the cracking, the shedding, the dying to old forms. But heaven does. Because heaven knows, without the underground process, there is no sustainable bloom. And you, chosen one, you didn't just sprout, you rooted. You grew downward before upward. You went deeper before brighter. And that's why this light can't be taken from you. Because it doesn't flicker with praise. It doesn't dim with rejection. It isn't fueled by who stays or who leaves. It is anchored in who sent you. And the one who sent you doesn't change his mind. So you walk with clarity now, not certainty about the path, but certainty about the presence that walks with you. You no longer fear the unknown. You honor it. You no longer resist the quiet. You find truth in it. You no longer crave visibility. You protect your invisibility when needed, because now you know, not everything precious must be seen to be sacred. Some of your greatest breakthroughs will be hidden. Some of your biggest victories won't be posted. Some of your deepest wisdom will only be shared in whispers. And that's what makes it powerful. Because your glow is not decoration. It's revelation. A revelation of what it means to live aligned, to live awake, to live anointed. And with that anointing comes responsibility. To walk slow, to listen well, to speak with intention. You are no longer reacting, you are responding. No longer proving, you are embodying. No longer pushing, you are flowing. Because alignment isn't loud, it's unmistakable. And now, everything in your life is beginning to mirror that alignment. The doors that open feel like home. The people who enter feel like family. The spaces you occupy no longer shrink you, they amplify you. Because heaven will never allow what's sacred to stay in hiding forever, and you've hidden long enough. So rise, not with haste, but with wholeness, not with force, but with fullness. This is not your moment of becoming. This is your moment of being. The one who no longer waits, the one who no longer asks, the one who simply is. You are not late, you are exact. You are not broken, you are rebuilt. You are not waiting for the light, you are carrying it. So walk as one who has been trusted with divine fire. Move as one who knows the value of silence. Speak as one who remembers the language of the dark, because now your voice doesn't just carry sound, it carries healing. Your presence doesn't just fill space, it awakens it. And your light, your quiet, steady, resilient light will be the confirmation someone else has been praying for. So shine fully, freely, fearlessly, not because you need to be seen, but because you are no longer afraid of being visible. You were trained in the dark for this. You were called before you were aware. You were anointed before they knew your name. And now that you've risen, don't look back. Everything that fell away was a release. Everything that stayed was a root. Everything that's coming is a reflection. You didn't just survive, you transcended. You didn't just glow, you illuminated. And the world will feel it. Not because you demand it, but because you are it. You are the living proof that divine preparation never fails. That sacred silence doesn't weaken, it fortifies. That the ones who rise from the hidden places carry something no spotlight can ever create. You are not done. This light, this presence, this movement you carry, it's only just beginning.